Good morning, class. Today we're going to be looking at The Garden by Arnold Lobel. Arnold Lobel writes and draws the pictures that go with his books. It's a frog and toad book, and I thought we'd read it because it reminds me of springtime. Right now, all the flowers are starting to come up out of the trees and out of the ground. And today is Earth Day, so it's a fun day to read about nature. The Garden. I'm going to hold it up for you today so you can see it while I read it. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog. "It is very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What's all this noise?" he asked. "My seeds will not grow," said Toad. "You're shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds are afraid to grow." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow." That night, Toad looked out of his window. "Drat," said Toad. Let's see if I can move it this way. There we go. "My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark." Toad went out to his garden with some candles. "I will read the seeds a story," said Toad. "Then they will not be afraid." Toad read a long story to his seeds. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. "What shall I do?" cried Toad. "These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world." Then Toad felt very tired, and he fell asleep. "Toad, Toad, wake up," said Frog. "Look at your garden." Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. "At last," shouted Toad, "my seeds have stopped." Sorry about that, friends. Let's see, I'm going to go back. Something weird happened. "At last," shouted Toad, "my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow." "And now you will have a nice garden too," said Frog. "Yes," said Toad, "you are right, Frog, but it was very hard work." next story is cookies. Some of us are lucky enough right now to have some gardens. And if you look at the science lesson from this week, some of us are lucky enough to have weeds coming up. And weeds are fun to watch too. A weed just means that it's a plant that you didn't intend to grow there. And some weeds are weeds that have come from far away that don't belong in our redwood environment. And so they're what we call invasive weeds. And you can learn more about those if you do the science lesson. All right, friends, I hope you have a great Earth Day, and hopefully we'll see you at reading group this week.